what has this conference series been about, really? Let me share with you just a few of the highlights so you will have a sense of the remarkable events which have led to this concluding World Forum. A year ago, young people from across this country and from more than 20 countries assembled at the University of Virginia for an International Youth Summit on the future of democracy. Undersecretary of State Karen Hughes delivered the keynote address, and these most impressive young people listened not only to scholars and leaders, but to each other. They came to Jamestown, the first Virginia capital, and to Washington, our nation's capital, and they began a candid dialogue about their own futures that continues to this day over the Internet. Future youth summits are already being planned.
Sitting here tonight are 300 of the most talented young people in the world, and I mean that really quite literally. They come from across the United States as well as 22 nations abroad, and we're very proud to have all of you with us. It was Mr. Jefferson who said, "The most effectual means of preventing the perversion of power into tyranny is to illuminate, as far as practicable, the minds of the people." In other words, to educate the people, and that's what we're doing.
I believe there's no more urgent challenge for our national security and for the future of all the young people throughout the world than our task of reaching out across the world to foster a sense of common interests and values and to confront common threats together. While there are many different aspects to democracy, it's fundamentally rooted in our belief in the worth and dignity and value of every single human being. In the words of our Declaration, in the words written by Thomas Jefferson, that each of us is created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, when you think about that, if you truly believe that each of us is created equal and endowed by our Creator with those rights, then you know that those rights are not just reserved for America, that those rights belong to all human beings everywhere. Here in America, we also need to do a better job of educating ourselves, as I mentioned, about the world, learning more about the world's history, learning more about other cultures, learning to speak different languages so that we can communicate better in the global world in which we live. By your presence here and your participation in this summit, each of you represent one more reason to be much more hopeful about the future of our world. I applaud you for participating in this summit, and I want to thank you so much for having me here this evening.
Next, we gathered at Longwood University and Hampton-Sydney College for a timely reflection on sustaining democracy in the global age. Hundreds of scholars from points far and wide assembled to hear, not just from other scholars, but from experienced public servants, such as Ambassador Richard Holbrooke, Congressman Lee Hamilton, and John Agresto of the Iraq Study Group. They commented candidly on the major issues of the day, as well as global and historical trends.
But democracy is not about a system of government, it's about a system of values. And democracy is so deeply embedded in our country that when it's challenged, and it gets challenged all the time, on the edges, the pushback is enormous. The central issue for American foreign policy, almost since the outset, was should our foreign policy encourage this system of government, these values, or should it not? And this has been a tremendous battle back and forth. And it goes back to President Washington's famous farewell address, which has been normally interpreted to mean stay out of these things because Washington said no entangling alliances. John Quincy Adams's famous 1826 speech where he said don't go forth to slay dragons overseas. But in modern terms, this argument begins with a native Virginian president named Woodrow Wilson. We need to be sure that going forward we can find a way to continue to stand for what we believe in as a country without trying to impose it on every society in the world. Trying to impose our system of government or our values on every country indiscriminately. Picking soil as unfertile as Iraq and saying democracy is our goal, when that really isn't our goal. Our goal was to get rid of Saddam and put in a stable, peaceful government and let it evolve and nurture it is the key. So I hope that you at this conference will reaffirm the fact that Iraq should not become an excuse for us to become isolationistic again, as we did after World War I, and as there was a threat of happening at the end of the Cold War. It's very important, and in that spirit I am just thrilled to see a conference, particularly in this city, in this town, which is so vital to the history of America, devoted to this subject. Thank you very much.
I'm old enough to remember John F. Kennedy. He made a very wise statement, at least to me. He said this: we must face the fact that the United States is neither omnipotent nor omniscient, that we are only 6% of the world's population, that we cannot impose our will on the other 94% of mankind, that we cannot right every wrong or reverse every adversity, and therefore, he said, there cannot be an American solution to every world problem. The world is a very complicated place, and other nations vigorously pursue their national interests. What Americans want, I think, is American leadership on behalf of a world where our interests are protected, where we work together with like-minded nations, and where the values of liberty and justice and freedom and opportunity are the norm and not the exception. In that great phrase from Martin Luther King, we want to see the arc of the moral universe bend toward justice.
We met next at Norfolk State University to consider the experience of racial and ethnic minority groups in democratic systems, and especially to hear the voices from the African American community who for so long were within the veil, but who are now a part of the rich tapestry that is the pluralistic American political system and society. Stirring cultural performances, reflections about faith, and remarks by Governor Kane and noted author Juan Williams were among the highlights of that conference.